Hi, and welcome back to the video series with Forward and Western Seminary. As you know, we've been talking about the changing demographics in America and how that's really changing what the women in church look like today. Thanks for taking this journey with us as we talk about the shifting demographics. With 47% of the American workforce being women today, we know that more and more women in your churches are in the workforce and facing very, very different challenges than they did 30 years ago. And we're thrilled today to be joined by two amazing women. We have Bev Hislop, who is a professor of pastoral care here at Western Seminary and an amazing author. We'll talk about that in a minute. And also thrilled, we have Tammy London. And Tammy, you are VP of Institutional Services at a national title company.
Correct.
With a really huge role there. So thanks for taking time out.
You bet.
You are truly a forward woman who's juggling it all. And so
I'm in it.
you are in it
the trenches.
every single day. So
That's right.
we're just excited to have these great women with us and to take things the next step and talk about not just the challenges women are facing and plugging into the church, but what are some true solutions that we can start implementing right away. So Bev, let's start with you.
Right.
So we know these shifting demographics are really changing what women are facing in their daily lives, but we still look the same on Sunday morning, don't we?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. So it's hard for a pastor to really understand, that this woman's facing maybe some different challenges than she was before. Now, you've written this fabulous book. It's called Shepherding a Woman's Heart. I love that title. And really, what you do every day is teach pastors at Western Seminary how to minister to women. Isn't that right?
Well, and women as well, as shepherds as well, in pastoral roles and those kinds of things. So, yes. And, it starts in Genesis 1 where a woman, Eve, was never without relationship. Adam was. And yet, when she came on the scene, that's when God said everything's very good after He created her.
Oh, I love that.
And, of course, both of them, their task was to work together, to work in the garden. And so before sin came in, that was God's intent, that we should work together, men and women. And so sin, of course, brought challenges, relational challenges, etc. But one of the things I wanted to focus on was that women are relational on so many levels. Not that men aren't, but I think women have a higher degree of care and interest and concern. So when a woman goes to church, for example, and she wants to feel part of what's happening, and it can be from, do I see myself represented up front? Is there a face like me up front? Or none? Or in the illustrations, like, is there any connection here with me? I think for women this is particularly important. And there's so many characteristics of women, and again, there's the bell curve, so there's always exceptions. But for the majority of women, for example, the thought that when there's stress that, fight or flight, well, that research was done on men.
Right.
And when women finally came into the picture and did research, they found that the different response was tend or befriend, which is tend the little ones, or befriend, let's go get that friend, the relationship, whatever. So even to understand that one thing about how we respond to stress and conflict differently can matter. In, for example, in a church setting,
Absolutely.
how that's talked about and how that's presented.
That's wonderful.
So
I
there's
love that.
there's lots of other differences. I think communication style, a lot of things that matter, and for a woman to be able to feel that relational connection that can come in a lot of ways is really a priority.
It's key. And we talked in another video about 27% of professional women are unplugging from their local church. And they take their families with them, they take their charitable giving with them because they're making a lot of the financial decisions in the home. And that really pains us. I know it pains you, and it's really a passion of ours. And so Tammy, you every single day, day in, day out, you have this amazing career. You're a wonderful wife and mother with 2 children.
I'm glad you said that.
Yes,
That's very nice. But
and you're a wonderful woman of faith trying to stay plugged into the church. So you're sort of our poster child, right? So, could you elaborate just from a real perspective, how important is that to feel that inclusion and that being plugged in?
yeah, I think there's a heightened sense of awareness and
because it's been a sore point for so many years. I was born and raised in the church, and I love the church. I married a pastor's son, and so I'll be plugged in for life. But I've always felt like the black sheep, because I was the working woman, and that was really my identity. So I think, in terms of feeling a part of the church, I want to hear that the pastor is recognizing me as a vital part of the congregation. But there's always a sense that the better group, the more spiritual Christian women, are the ones that are involved in women's ministry. And because of the time pressures, it's very challenging to get there. So I don't think they intend to create silos, but there is a silo.
No, I think you're right. And you mentioned time. I mean, we only have 24 hours a day. We'd love to add
And we use
more.
every minute of it.
And we use every second of it. My joke is if I can make it till 10 o'clock and have all three of them bathed and fed and alive, that's a great
and not
day.
bugging you anymore.
Exactly. Mama. So, no, absolutely. And that's, that's real. We have pressures on our marriage that are very different. Managing two careers and travel schedules and financial decisions and,
Definitely.
Who's carrying the insurance. I mean, all of those things that we
and
talk
even
about.
the role challenges. I think that one was a biggie too.
Absolutely. And a lot of double income families face those. But I share that. I often, coming up, especially in my 20s as a single woman, felt like I didn't belong because I wasn't a stay-at-home mom in church. There was either something wrong with me or nothing for me. And so I recognize that feeling very much so. And so unfortunately, women are starting to find it elsewhere. And you have a great story.
Right. Yeah. Well, Sandra, it was a deep pain point that led to me doing something about it, because if my church wasn't going to provide that, I still wanted to be a part of what my church was doing, which was a Mother-Wise Bible study that I really loved the speaker, the content, and so forth. And so I just decided to do one virtually. And I picked clients that I was working with that had expressed a hunger in their relationship with God. And so I even let the leader of this national organization, Mother-Wise, know that I was teaching her materials over the phone. And she thought that was hilarious. I was one of 600 cell groups across the country, the only one doing it that way. But I said, of course, how else are we going to do it? I was actually coaching women at that time all over the country. So we were on different time zones. But we studied together every 2 weeks, because that was good for our schedules, and in a designated time to work through the workbook and do a Bible study where we could go deeper in how to be a good mom and a good wife. And so that led to bringing in Denise Glenn, who was the leader of that, to actually teaching one of our Bible studies over the phone. And so, we needed to go deeper. These are women who go to church on Sundays but wanted Bible study. So that's what we did.
So what you did was amazing, because you stayed at least plugged into your faith.
And sort of the church,
and
because
the church.
they were doing that study at the church. What I would have loved was probably somebody from the church to know about it, and there was nobody to really tell. And for that connectivity, because they were getting prayed over on their Tuesday morning meetings, and I didn't feel that prayer coverage, but that was maybe my limited time of reaching out to them too.
Well, I love it that you created your own connection, right?
Have to.
It didn't exist, so you created it yourself. So many women, Bev, though, we're hearing as Forward goes across the country, so many women are unplugging from the church because they don't feel it, and they go find a connection elsewhere, outside of the church, and sometimes leads to slippery slopes. I know you're passionate about that too, and so...
Yes, well, I was just sort of in another decade, relating in a way, as a young, very young pastor's wife, in a church where I felt like if I couldn't pour Kool-Aid or wipe little noses, that there wasn't a place for me, and there wasn't. And I often found myself in the kitchen And I would turn around and realize that I was shepherding or giving pastoral care to someone, conversation here on the side.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a woman would turn to me when everything was all done. Well, thanks a lot for helping, Bev, because I just, was doing this the whole time without realizing it.
Right.
But it also put a passion in my heart to say, there needs to be something more for women. And so I had the opportunity to start an evening Bible study, even way back then, which amazes me when I think about it still. But just that passion, which has stayed with me all this time, that we need to have something that's available to all women. And I'll segue to another illustration. In my Women in Leadership class here at Western Seminary, my heart has been for women in the marketplace as well as women just wherever, women, period.
Right.
And so I realized that maybe the marketplace women weren't being represented as well. So I had a woman come in who's been in the marketplace and the church. And so the first time she came in to teach, we put on the board corporate women, ministry women, and just give us a word, that comes to your mind when you see both of those. And so Daisy stood over there and I stood over here and we wrote the words, and when we got all done, in fact, it was a really hard after class session for us because they were all negative in the corporate world and they were positive in ministry. And Daisy and I really just teared up. I mean, we cried, and ever since then Daisy has co-taught that class with me because the passion has just gone deeper to say, that is not negative. We have mission no matter where God places us.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're passionate at Forward that, we each have an Ephesians 2:10 calling, right? And that word workmanship really means poem, as Jim has talked a lot about in another video. We are his beautiful poem that he has created from before time with certain gifts and skills and abilities. And for some of us, both male and female, those gifts and skills and abilities fit more into a corporate environment than they do into running our home or running a church. And that's beautiful.
Yes.
That's what makes the world work.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so we have a big passion about that around Forward, because a lot of women that are working outside the home feel that aloneness or that guilt or that shame. And so to hear that story, that makes perfect sense. So now let's start talking about some recommended solutions. How about that? So as we've gone out and we've done all these interviews and focus groups and had all this anecdotal data, it really boiled down to 4 reasons women in the workforce are unplugging from their churches. So let's go through each of those. So the first one is the examples from the pulpit or the screen or the stage or the website don't really pertain to me. The examples are men in business and women at home, and the images are mostly male or of families with mom being the wife, right? So that was the first reason, women say they started to unplug. I just don't see myself in the picture.
Yeah.
You think that's right on, Tammy?
Well, the stereotypes we're, like I said, very sensitive to them. And if the illustration is, the man's coming home to the wife, I mean, it doesn't work that way, My husband and I share dinner responsibilities,
Right.
so I think definitely I'm listening and picking up on that and who's speaking primarily, and I do want to hear a woman in ministry that's acknowledging this group over here.
We had a pastor in another video, Bev, say, until someone asked the question, why isn't there a woman on stage on Sundays, it hadn't even occurred to me. And so what do you think are some things pastors and churches and staffs could do a little differently to address that concern?
Well, I think to be able in an appropriate way to mention, to question, sometimes the form of a question, the coaching approach, sometimes can be helpful. And maybe to bring some concerns to the table about, I just don't understand how this relates to me. I'm not seeing the connection between what you're saying, what you're teaching, and where I am, but I'd like to. And maybe even to give some suggestions if there's an openness to that. I think one of the things I hear women say a lot too is, God has given me a spiritual gift, and I know and want to use that gift. Where can I use that gift? If I don't see a room in my church to use that gift, it can be very painful for women. I've experienced a lot of women expressing that pain of, just feeling this desire and this passion and this ability, and yet where?
Mhm.
Where's
Well, in
the
fact,
opening?
that's number two.
Oh,
The
okay.
second reason women say they're unplugging from church is I feel underutilized at church.
Mhm.
I don't feel like my spiritual gifts are being used. You know, my joke is I get asked to make tater tot casseroles and serve in the nursery, and you don't want either one of those things, right? And you said
Yeah.
Kool-Aid or wiping noses, right? And so a lot of women feel that way. So number one, let's look at, can we use inclusive language, inclusive imagery, have more women represented in front of the churches? And number two, let's talk about that. How can churches utilize more of these gifts of these women who, you know, have an Ephesians 2:10 calling to be outside of the home? What are some ideas there?
Well, I would say number one, the equipping of the women to be strong in their faith. They're on the front lines. I feel very much that my work is lifestyle evangelism. I'm a missionary in my work. Now, I didn't have that conclusion or understanding early on. I wish I would have, because I had to go to a counselor to get it figured out, and that I was okay. He'd have to just tell me, you're okay, because I think I needed to quit everything to be spiritual and a godly woman. But God wasn't leading me on that path. So
Well, he was, just in a very different way, in a very
Yeah.
different definition.
Yeah.
You were a walking 24/7 evangelist.
yeah,
We hear that a lot. You know, working women will say, you know, I'm going into my mission field Monday morning at 8 a.m.,
right.
but yet on Sunday, nobody prayed over me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we often say, I don't need to go get shots to be a missionary because I go out, you know, Monday through Friday and do that.
Right.
So how do you think, Bev, pastors could recognize, imagine if we could ignite these women in the churches across America,
Yeah.
not only have them feel included by seeing themselves in the picture, but then their spiritual gifts being used in the local church. Imagine
Yes,
that.
yes.
I mean, I get
Powerful,
giddy.
powerful.
Yes.
I just think of an illustration in a local church here, a single mom. To me, that's like one of the most challenging. You can't compare pain, but that's one of the greatest challenges. And a single mom who had 6 children,
Oh,
single
my.
mom, one of them disabled. Actually, they empty nested almost, and she started a ministry for single moms, and she was able to do that in a church environment that had an evening option where they served food and they had something for children, so the single moms could come, their children can be involved, and then it's just been phenomenal what she's done with these women.
And the church supported her in that, right?
Absolutely.
So as we think about, you know, how can a pastor and a staff, you know, encourage this? You know, one of the things we said was a pastor can go and, who are these women, right? Just reach out into the community and identify them, meet them for coffee, take them to lunch. I mean, just acknowledge that I'm walking a different path.
Well,
you know.
that's somebody that's saying, we want to get you, and there's nothing that helps you stick to an organization more than somebody who's showing that they care and they're understanding of your needs. So that's A1. That's kind of no brainer, because that's so much more powerful one-on-one than even the group, because I might get missed in the group. But I think in order to be able to have that outflow in the church, we need to be equipped with the church, and you know, we have to go outside the church to get that equipping to be a leader, you know. And so there's all kinds of seminars, there's training, there's equipping even in all those parachurch organizations for evangelism. So how can we bring some of those groups into the church, even cooperate with them to get trained and equipped, and then I have something to spill out back to the church, because the church fed me on this. Of course I want to give back. You know?
We see across America in churches, there's a big disciple-making movement. And when you get into a church, you see the disciple-making movement for men. The men are working, and so they're meeting and they're discussing work issues and leadership issues at work and different
On
things.
Saturday mornings.
And then the discipleship making for women is about caring for a home and being a wife and a mother, and nothing about work or career is even in that curriculum.
Right.
And so I see that, and I feel that pain. And so one of the things, you know, we talked about earlier was, you know, bringing a circle of women together, acknowledging them, because I always say, if a person can feel heard
Yeah.
right? So first
Yeah.
see themselves in the picture
Yeah.
and then feel heard and treasured.
Yeah.
I'm never going to leave.
You know,
Right.
an open forum format, I think, is a wonderful place to start. And it could be the result of a survey. Surveys just, give an indication of what people are thinking or feeling anonymously, but an open forum then brings it into a setting where we can vocalize, and then even in that setting, I'm not alone,
Right. Right. Well, and finding out what are the skill sets in your church, right?
There's a whole
We
nother-
recommend Strength Finders
Yeah.
2.0
Yeah,
at Forward.
absolutely.
We believe in it strongly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
imagine if you have a building committee or a finance committee or a new project or a disciple making movement, and you were able to use some tool, whether it's Strength Finders or not, to find out what
Yeah.
are the strengths and gifts
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
And then you're going to find some amazing women
Yeah.
that have these gifts from birth. But you
Right.
have to look for them. Right, Bev? I mean, don't you think that's part of
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. And I do want to say that I think there are several churches, lots of churches here actually in the Northwest, who are opening their doors and thinking more about working women. They're scheduling things that working women can attend, and they're involving women in things other than women's ministry. And I do need to say this, that women's ministry historically began because women were looking for a place that was more related to them. So they have their place, and then men's ministry started. And I think now we've shifted to that place that we feel like there's more benefit if we can be together. Now that doesn't, in my opinion, totally replace women's ministry, because I think when we meet as women and we can share some of those things that, what it's like to just the female parts of our experience, and we can share those with other women who fully understand that. And what does the Bible say? I think there are areas and places where it's great for women to share on a deeper level, and I think discipleship is one of those. And so I think there's some of that happening. I would love to see more, and I'd also think we're moving historically more to that place of integrating so that we can begin to benefit from the fact that we were created in the image of God, both male and female, and to be able to benefit from that. Not only understand more fully who God is, but to reflect who He is better. So I love that we're moving in that direction.
Well, let's talk about that a minute, because number 3 is,
Oh.
you're great. Number 3 is the women's programs at my church don't necessarily align with my work schedule, because I'm working Monday through Friday and I'm traveling and those sorts of things. And so at some churches, the women's ministry programming is Wednesday morning at 9:30. Or even a women's retreat. I'm away from my children during the work week. A women's retreat
It's really difficult.
is very difficult for me. I want to be there on Saturday morning and make the funny face pancakes, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to go to a women's retreat. So we hear a lot of women say, the programming just doesn't logistically fit my schedule. So I love when you talk about creative ways churches are reaching out. Do you guys have any other examples of that?
I think they're trying to get creative. I'm not sure it's all there yet for the needs that we have. And granted, there's various, I would say, dimensions of need for a working woman. Some go to a job 9 to 5 and then they call it quits. Others, that job doesn't stop at 5. They're still thinking about it at 11 o'clock at night and 2 in the morning. So I think sometimes the alternative might need to be a technology solution.
For a virtual solution,
Yeah,
sure.
and I don't think it's the best thing, but I think it's definitely a go-to because it does give them something
Sure.
rather than nothing. And the live, conference call or WebEx, those are absolutely where people are going on a Sunday morning if they can't get to church.
Right.
And a lot of those working women are using that as an alternative. Well, they're missing so much more, the worship community, everything, excuse me, else that goes along with that. And so it's not to take away from the church, but I think there are ways that you can use that. If they missed, there's a go-to.
So taking
with
what you're
people.
already doing and making it also available on a virtual program.
Yeah, and it could be that it's a live, there's a group meeting, not just on your own time. So it creates a little more extra community.
Right. No, absolutely. Bev, what about you? I'm sure you have some great examples.
Well, I was just going to add the whole idea of mentoring. The whole
Oh,
idea
yeah.
of connecting one to
Yeah.
one as well as two or three, you know,
Absolutely.
that are maybe even in your
Yeah.
workplace
Mhm.
or at lunch at your workplace, those that are more, you know, available and accessible and can take that
That's
time.
huge. If somebody came to me, Tammy, we want to pray for you. We understand and recognize that you're doing some ministry work that's very specialized. You know, there were years, about 8.5 years, when I was in a coaching role. I had opportunity to share Christ and do another virtual Bible study on how to begin a relationship with God. And it was actually leading people to Christ over the phone. It was very powerful.
Wow.
And it was like doing church in that sense. And I got to tell you, I mean, it was, I just would ask people to pray because you're getting attacked. You know, the enemy isn't liking that. But a thread to my church of understanding what I'm doing, the prayer warriors to be on call, that would be huge. So,
Okay, and there's one more, and this one is sort of my personal passion, and that is women say they feel isolated at church because there's no bucket into which they fit. It sounds like we've said all along that it's identifying these women
yeah.
and helping them start their own bucket,
Yeah.
right? Would you
Yeah.
agree with that, Bev?
I would, and I think the example of the single moms that I said, they were all working.
Right.
And I think that was an excellent illustration of a woman who had the need. And so that's what she did. She just started one, and it was okay, you know, with the church obviously approving that, and it was a great setting. And that thing just really is still expanding in unbelievable ways. And she was able to do things like, let's come on a Saturday, and they can do childcare. And then they made freezer meals for a month on a Saturday.
Wow.
Oh wow!
And
I want to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. I mean, that's the point.
That's a
That's a
good,
great
that's a
one.
good, real practical
real life.
help.
Yes,
Mhm.
and those
You
are
know.
the kind of things that can be done in a group like that.
And I think we can share the strengths. I tell you, if I sit down with a woman who, I think of my neighbors that have been at home all these years, and my sister-in-law, they feel ill-equipped to deal with some of the things in life if they were making the transition to go into the workforce after having their kids. They need something we have to offer. And vice versa. I love learning how to make quicker, easier meals because that's always been my struggle. So I think there is a way we can share each other's strengths in an intentional forum. I'm not sure all that looks like, but definitely untapped. You know, I think we both want to share. We need to break down those silos and those preconceived categories we put
Right.
each other in. It tears down. It doesn't build up. And there was something I was going to speak to because I think we have such a strong identity around being a woman who works. I'm a working woman. I'm a working mom, and so I had a conviction moment one time at a marriage conference where she was talking about the role of a godly woman and the role of a godly wife in Proverbs. And I sat there, and the Holy Spirit really spoke to me in a profound way. I'm sitting in between two of the most godly pillar women in the church. You know, this one homeschools her 4 kids, this one homeschools her 4 kids. And I'm like, who am I? You know? And when she talked about that, I go, she's not talking about that role of a working woman, but the Lord quickened in my heart that, but am I doing this, and this? And so conversely, I need to be paying attention to what does the word say about being a godly woman, period. And so my priorities, even as a working woman, have been screwed up at times. In fact, that was my conviction moment. I started bawling. I never cry. I had to leave because there was that awareness, oh no, I'm leaving out the most important roles in a way that I cannot leave out. And God helped me readjust my schedule to leave at 2:30 and go home and be a mom and a wife. And so at the peak of my career when I had young kids, I went home when they got home from school. And it was a trickle-down effect in a profound way in my home. So I understand, I know how to, the need for awareness of everything that we need to be as a godly woman,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
so.
Yeah.
I so appreciate you bringing that up, Tammy, because I think that is at the core, isn't it? What does a godly woman look like?
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
that is the commonality that we have with other women, and of
Mhm.
course with men too. You know, what does God look like in my life? Is He
Mhm.
central? Is He,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
and who is this God?
And the importance of work, I think, you know, on our end as working women, we go, you are overwhelmed and your kids aren't even at home anymore. They're out of the home and you're still, you know, being a stay-at-home wife and mother. You're overwhelmed. How could you, you know, they look at us like, how could you do all that? Well, we've learned the discipline of time management. We've had to, but I don't need to look at women that way either and diminish their importance and their abilities. But I think they need to be empowered by some of the ways that we've had to kind of come up to a different standard of juggling more. And not that it's good to juggle more, but I think unleashing them in their giftedness right where they're at. And so I think we can help women at home, I know, help them figure out their own purpose and plan. So I think we can share.
Yes.
Well, we've talked a lot about these silos within the church that have, you know, maybe women feel like I'm working outside the home, I don't fit into any of these buckets, and you know, I share your passion that, you know, putting people into buckets really isolates us and doesn't integrate us and doesn't allow us to mentor and disciple and come together first as believers, second as women, right?
Yeah,
And then, oh yes, we also work outside of the home,
right,
you know, not the other way around.
right.
And, you know, really our passion here today in this video series and talking today is just to help give some practical ideas of things
Yeah.
churches and
Yeah.
pastors can do. And so, you know, we talked about having examples of language and message and even visuals and who's on stage at church also represent men and women. We talked about this amazing set of giftedness in the church of all these women in the workplace that are out there that maybe aren't being utilized.
Definitely underutilized.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so could we unleash those? How can we first find them and identify and unleash them and get them back working for the church?
Yeah.
You know, not having those spiritual gifts utilized elsewhere,
Right.
you know, use them in the church. And we talked about just the logistical third issue of scheduling. You know, that you know, the programming that does exist, the fellowship that does exist, you know, having the awareness that doesn't work a lot of times for a working woman's schedule. And so to get creative, add some
Use the
virtual options,
technology.
and also ask the women what they want. So identify who
Absolutely.
are they and ask them what they want. And then this fourth topic of let's not isolate people and put them in silos. Let's light them on fire for the Lord and acknowledge them and feel included.
And I think, you know, hearing it from the stage, you talked about, you know, up front, I think it's nice to hear how working women did it. That's definitely inspirational. It says I'm okay because there's somebody the church is elevating as somebody to look up to as a godly woman. Good. I want that person to be included in the sharing times and the teaching times.
Some other topics we heard is, you know, focused small groups, prayer over their ministries and their work, tangible help, you know, taking someone dinner or helping them make frozen meals. I mean, that would be like, you know, or knowing who those women are, encouraging them with a note or a phone call, right? Taking her out to lunch, bringing her coffee, you know, using the technology. I mean, there are lots of creative ways that we could understand, you know, what's going on out there. But
Well, we need to reach those women. We need to pull them into the church, and it needs to be compelling. It needs to be exciting. It needs to be relevant. And I think the church has so much to offer. I pray that a one-on-one relationship with the mentoring that Forward offers is something that people latch on to. And I believe in that because I was a coach for 8.5 years of hundreds of women, and I know the power of a one-on-one relationship. So it's hard to beat that, right?
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
And I think there's emotional pain in most every woman's life, which of course is one of my areas.
Yeah.
And I think that's an awesome place to connect. Do you know what I mean? Just to have another woman that understands,
Yeah, be
that can
transparent.
listen
Yeah.
and pray for and with you.
That you don't have to pay for, because
Yeah.
I mean, all these years that I've been in these just high pressure roles that God's led me to, I've always had to engage someone outside, you know, in a coaching role myself. I know the power of it, or a mentor. I seek those mentors, and sometimes people don't have the money to pay for it. Mine happens to be in my church, but I think, you know, we all need that older, wiser woman who's walked in our footsteps, in a voluntary, you know, contribution way to say, I'm here for you to help you navigate this. Yeah.
Well, and you know, one of the things we do at Forward, it is all about that multi-generational fellowship and mentorship and discipleship of, you know, as women, you know, with careers, sometimes it's hard to find a mentor or someone who's going to pour into me that is career-minded and, you know, is a woman and is a woman of God. You know, and so if, you know, that's what Forward is passionate about. And I know, Bab, that's what you're very passionate about. So, you know, we'll end with this story. There's a study that shows a young child can look at a photo album, and as they turn the pages, if by page 3 that young child doesn't see a photo of them in the photo album, they put it down and walk away. They're completely uninterested.
Oh, wow.
And you know, the example is drawn that as humans, we need to see ourselves painted into the picture. So if we can leave, you know, the folks that are watching this video with one thought, it's that women who are working outside of the home want to see themselves painted into the picture of your message and your church and your imagery and your fellowship and who you're reaching out to and discipling. And that's really what this video series is all about, is to raise awareness and give some practical, easy solutions. So Bev, thank you so much for being here. Your book's amazing, and your heart for women and for pastors, and it's just
My
fantastic.
pleasure. I'm delighted to be part of this. I'd love to see this rising a little bit more to the surface.
that's
That's
wonderful.
really my heart too.
And
so.
Tammy, I just applaud you for everything you've done to stay plugged into church, even through the crazy and the busy, and to circle back and now being in a situation to pour back into other women. I think it's just phenomenal.
I'm thankful. I'm thankful that God can use the pain.
That's right. That's right.
He does, doesn't he?
That's right. He
Redeeming
does.
God. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Well, thanks for watching. We're so thrilled that you're here, and keep tuning in. We're going to have a lot more for you.